All right, let's bring in Maurice Jones-Drew. Maybe we can bring him back in to get that yard on 3rd down and 4th down. Come on, you got a couple more in you? You got a couple of inches? That's all we needed, Maurice Jones-Drew.
You know what, Brent? First and foremost, they have guys on this roster to do it. And I think a lot of times we overcomplicate what it should be. And when watching this game, it was like there were so many different scenarios and situations that the Jags could have taken over the game and kind of just blown them away that they didn't do it. And I understand what people are saying, don't go for on 4th and 1. I was okay with that call. I'm okay with being aggressive in that situation. But ETN is not your short yardage goal line back. And that's where I get a little confused with is that you still have to coach the situational football, right? And you have to be masters of the situation. You have to have the personnel for the situation. I understand James Robinson is dealing with a little knee, whatever it may be. Then run the read option and let Trevor have the choice to decide to get the yard or to give it to ETN. But have some different plays. That was just a pure handoff, and we're just going to be more powerful than you guys. And their offensive line is not built that way. And so I personally feel like there's a lot of situations that in the course of this game that could have changed. Now, I understand. I saw you on Twitter talking to Uche, and I understand that the Jags are going with ETN. That is completely fine. But there are scenarios and there are situations for James Robinson to come in like on the goal line or being a short yardage back or whatever it may be to give the ETN a spell and still have an explosive, powerful guy to help continue to move the chains. You don't always have to throw the ball down the field. You don't always have to do these things. Your team is trying to learn how to win, and you guys are losing in the situations, and it's very frustrating, I think, for everyone.
Hey, Maurice Jones-Drew brought up Uche Nwaneri, former Jags player, of course, and he jumped in on social media today. I had a comment yesterday about this James Robinson situation is not going away, and it's not. I mean, it's a big story right here, and we'll talk more about that. But Uche said he literally was the difference in the New York Giants game. His lack of true running back pedigree is why he fumbled in the end zone. He's reckless with ball security. Shelving James Robinson, will bite the Jags in the you-know-what in a big way, and they will deserve it. And I said, I like the conversation, but hard time saying he's not a running back. By trade, he ran for 5,000 yards in college. But he did have some stretches where he fumbled the football also in college. And then Uche, one more just to read and catch everybody up. College football is not the NFL. Being a running back in college versus the NFL is not the same. He's a hybrid. He's not a true back. I can see that because I know I blocked for one of the best in his era. Is he talking about you?
No, he must be talking about Fred. No, I will say this. I think Uche does have a point. A lot of backs in the National Football League, i.e. Antonio Gibson or Kenneth Gainwell or even Darrell Henderson, that come out of these spread sets, like ETN, they don't know how to get the tough yard because everything is, read option. You're just trying to hit the hole quick. And I understand that's what Doug is trying to go to as well. But the National Football League will always be the National Football League. And there's two things about the National Football League that's completely different than college. One, the situations are different, right? And everyone has to understand how we're trying to attack each situation. And two, ball security. In college, a lot of people don't attack the football, right? They tackle you. Literally, if you watch the Cleveland Browns versus the Baltimore Ravens, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah didn't even try to tackle Justice Hill from the Baltimore Ravens. He just punched at the ball, and the ball came flying out. And so ball security has to be much more emphasized, and I know it is, but you have to really emphasize it a ton with young guys that haven't played because they're so used to just carrying the ball and just breaking big runs. And so Uche has a point there for sure. Now, I wouldn't say he's just not a running back. I think losing last year definitely stunted his growth a little bit, but you see the explosiveness and the explosive nature of his game. And even with those explosive runs, you still see the ball carried out wide, and there's a lot of air between his body and the ball. So they're going to have to try to correct that. Otherwise, you'll have more fumbles with ETN.
So, Mojo, if I could dial in on what you're saying, are you saying that Travis Etienne's being overused or that we're just not using James Robinson the way we should, period?
The second. I'm saying you're just not using James Robinson the way he should be. I don't. Travis Etienne is a very explosive player, and I see why they want to get him the ball. Understandably so. You have two backs, though. Go to a two-back system. Doug Peterson is known for a running back by committee in Philadelphia. That's what he was known for. And so it struggles with me to see his change in philosophy. And I don't understand why they're doing it. But when you have two guys that can go, you run those two guys because, as we always knew, when I was there with Fred, as I got there, Fred's career and his play lasted longer. He wasn't just a guy to go all the time, right? as we got later in the season, we were able to run for multiple yards because I was taking a lot of reps from him so that he could be fresh come November and December. And if you're expected to play great football down the stretch, you have to win close games like this. And I personally feel like the lack of usage or lack thereof of usage of James Robinson not getting a touch is why you lost this game. And there were a ton of situations where he could have got a series or he could have got a play or two here or there, whatever it might have been that would have helped this team be successful. You got to utilize them. Brent, we talked about this, putting your players in position to be successful, right? And that Doug Peterson did that the first couple weeks. As of late, that's not happening. And so I'm starting to kind of wonder, like, what's going on. And again, I don't want to question, but when you lose 3 straight and you lose in the way the Jags have, it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, and I don't.
Right? Hasty had a big.
Yeah, go ahead.
Didn't Hasty have a big run Hasty had a 60-yard run last week.
He did.
Right?
Yeah.
Why is he not getting a touch?
Well, he did actually.
Some type of touches.
He did a couple, but even before James Robinson, I think that's what caught everybody's attention. I mean, the snap count was so low for James Mojo. It was like 12. And he got 1 target. He had a run that was called back because of a penalty, and that's it. I mean, it's his lowest production, like, ever in his life. Like, he's never played a football game with that low of production. But Hasty was actually in there more than at times, at least early in the game, or first or early, which was really surprising to all of us watching.
Well, yeah, as I was watching the game, again, I was watching the Jags plus a couple other games as well. It was just, when you'd watch them and you're seeing it, like, yeah, I don't know if he's hurt or whatever it may be. I know Doug came out and said he's dealing with some knee soreness, or whatever it may be. That's fine. But you can't put the load on ETN right now. You can't just run him constantly. You have to give him breaks. The same way running the football gives the quarterbacks breaks, right? As they're not getting exposed to different coverages and the ability to get hit and sacked. And so you want to find ways to continue to spread the ball around to give breaks so that when you do get in the fourth quarter, guys are fresh and ready to go, and they can get those tough yards. They can get those tough plays. And with all that being said, you still dialed up a great play to get into the end zone, right? And was an inch away from getting into the end zone. And so it's, that's the game. That's football. That's the National Football League. 2 or 3 plays are going to determine the outcome of the game every time. And those fourth downs, those going for it, not converting in certain situations, some of those 3 and outs that they were having, those are plays in series that come back to bite you in the end.
Maurice Jones-Drew with us always on Mondays, Mojo on Mondays, and appropriate time just to be talking about the running back situation, the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's a big story around here. James Robinson was the story of last year, kind of in a microcosm of everything that was happening. It was the drama point, in my opinion, with Urban Meyer. But Urban Meyer didn't like him as a back, as a player in the NFL. I mean, that was crystal clear. Not didn't like him. Everybody loves James, and this fan base really appreciates James Robinson for what he is, what he's done, his story, and the rest. But Urban didn't like him from a style standpoint. And I think, Maurice Jones-Drew, it was because of his lack of speed. He's not a burner. He's not a blazer in today's fast NFL. Well, Doug Peterson, didn't feel that way. I thought he did a good job in camp and got him healthy and then was using him early on. But we saw a shift now a couple weeks ago to Travis Etienne. And now we're seeing, whether it's injury-based or falling out of favor, like, why don't coaches like James Robinson like we all do? Is it strictly speed or lack thereof?
Well, I think a lot of coaches, as a guy that's coaching now, speed, I used to always hear the coach say, you can't coach speed, right? If I can give a guy a ball and he can take it 90 yards to the house, that makes my job a lot easier. Understandably so. I get that point. But I also believe that you got to have different styles of runners in your running back room, the same way you want to have different body types of receivers in your receiving room, right? So do I want all burners as running backs? No. I want guys that are going to give me the tough 2 or 3, 4 yards. I want guys that can go into a 4-minute mode and we just roll the clock out. I want guys also I can throw the ball out of the backfield and have explosive plays, or guys that can line up a wide receiver, or you want to have a different variety, of styles in your running back room. And so right now, it seems like a lot of these teams that you're starting to look at, they all want the same style back. I mean, I work for the Rams. They all want the same style back. And the problem is what comes with the same style back is the teams can prepare for the same style of run plays. They can prepare for the same style of the way you utilize them. And so to me, having different style guys to do different things will always be harder on a defense. It'll force them to have to learn more, practice more, different plays, different things. And so right now, I just think you're right. It's just maybe James doesn't have the speed that they think he has or the ability, but I just saw him break off a 50, 60-yarder against the Chargers in week 2. Like, it makes no sense to me.
Does any of this, do you think, guys, have to do with the fact that you have such a talented passer in a Trevor Lawrence that you're trying to spread around who's handling the ball to a degree where you go, all right, we've got roughly 12 to 20 carry or attempts between Etienne and Robinson. How are we going to split that with Etienne being so dynamic and Robinson really needing to pound and pound and pound before he can break through for bigger yardage? It just seems every time I look at the Jaguars, whether I think they should be passing or running, they're passing. Period. Like it's
yeah.
Go ahead, Mojo.
I mean, I think that's where the money is, right? Obviously, your draft capital, your big price, high price for your agent is there. And even with all that being said, we're here to win games. We're not here to justify why we pay people or why we drafted people. We're here to win games. And I think the Jags are doing their best in trying to win games. It's just sometimes we get into situations and we see things, right? But I remember being there with Dirk Cutter, and I remember in 2008, Brent, you probably were one of the reporters I was like venting to at the time. But we weren't built to throw the ball 40 times a game. But that's what we wanted to do because we were seeing 8-man boxes every week. And guys are playing press man. I was like, but that's not what our team is. Our team is not that. If you draft and you add free agents for our team to do that, okay, cool, we could do it. But right now, that's not who we are. And so we shouldn't start doing things because we see, oh, well, they're playing a loaded box or we got one-on-one covers on the outside. Like, so what? Be who you are. And until the Jags start throwing for 400 yards a game like the Chiefs and all these other teams, you're a balanced offense. You have to be able to run the ball and throw the ball the same. You want to be as 50-50 as possible. And so I think sometimes we just get caught up. And I say we because, again, as players and coaches, you get caught up in, okay, well, they're doing this. We should be able to do that because it works on paper. Well, I'm a big component of Jimmy and Joe's, and they had a tremendous defense you were going against, and you guys are moving the ball up and down the field with ease until they got into these crucial situations where either the play wasn't executed the right way or it was a bad spot or whatever it might have been, and then it kind of got away from the Jags.
Maurice Jones-Drew joining us right now on ESPN 690. Brent Friends, Brent Martineau, Aaron Schechter, Casey Kurtz, and Mojo. Let me ask you this. You mentioned getting to that balance with the wide receivers, the running backs, all that. And when I watched the play at the end of the game, Christian Kirk, he's a yard short of getting in, right? And I go back to a conversation me and Brent had a lot of the summer. Is Christian Kirk a true number one receiver? Mojo, when you watch this guy play, do you think there's still a receiver short, a big play guy? Or will Christian Kirk get it done? Just got to give it more time.
Well, I think when you look at a number one wide receiver, you're looking at like A.J. Brown, right? Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs. Those are your number one guys. I think Christian Kirk is a high number two guy that can make plays, but D-Hop, right? Like those are guys that when the ball is up, they're going to come down with it. And so the Jags don't have that guy. And they're working towards it. Their roster and their receiving core is way better than it's been in a long time. But there's not many true number one wide receivers in the National Football League. And I want people to understand that those guys come few and far between. And when you have an opportunity to get those guys, you get them and you keep them because there's not many of them. I think I named, 6?
Yeah.
At this point, like there's not many just number one wide receivers that you can throw the ball to, that they're getting covered by the best DB and the safety on top, and they're still going to come down with it. Those guys don't come around. And so you have to build a system that is able to kind of showcase the other receivers' abilities until you get that guy. And then when you get that guy, you got to make sure your system is built to get him the ball as much as possible.
Maurice, go back to James' situation as it looks at the entire locker room. Because, again, last year there was a lot going on, man. And everybody rallied around James in that locker room. In fact, they went to talk to the coach about him, like guys like Trevor Lawrence and others. And they said, what are we doing here? And Trevor got him back in the game at one point. So it's not that situation. There's a lot of respect for Doug Peterson in that locker room. This is a locker room that I think is pretty mature overall. It's also a group that they brought in guys like Christian Kirk to be able to handle situations that if you did go through a 4-game slide or something like that, that it wasn't going to splinter. But how does this get handled in the locker room? I understand. I mean, listen, ETN is taken. It must be even a difficult spot for him. He's the guy now. And that's going to be an interesting transition with the guy that you're always next to in drills and in the room. And then from James's standpoint, does he have to just go talk to the coaches? Does he talk to his running backs coach? Like, what happens there?
You got to win, Brent. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
You got to win. At the end of the day, like, we're questioning all these things because the Jags lost.
True.
If the Jags won, we wouldn't be questioning anything. We'd be like, well, Etienne's the guy, and we got to go out there. Like, you have to win. And until you win, people are going to question everything you do because of the history of this organization. And so, yeah, you have playmakers and guys that are going around. And if this recipe that you built up and you created to go against the Giants, if it didn't work, you need to tweak it and figure out another way to try to find a way to get a victory. Winning is what solves everything. As soon as you win, then you're like, okay, we got what we're looking for. Let's try to replicate this again. That's all the NFL is. Let's replicate whatever recipe of success that we have for this week. Let's try to replicate it week after week after week. And so until they win, we're going to keep questioning everything. I mean, that's just who we are as people. That's our job titles. And right now, the week's topic is, why wasn't James Robinson part of this recipe for success? He's been one of your better runners over the last couple of years, and he continues to still showcase his abilities out there. Maybe he is a little banged up, and that's okay, but that needs to come out and be said. You just don't go out there and not play a guy or give him one carry or one, and expect people to be like, especially if a guy off an undrafted guy rushes for 1,000 yards and it was the best player on the team a couple of years ago. That doesn't just fall off a cliff in 2 years. You know what I mean? And so they, as coaching staff and as players, they need to find a way to figure out to get a victory. And once you get a victory, then you got to try to replicate that. And so to me, it's not necessarily, just this style didn't work this week. So whatever you're doing, try to tweak it for next week, and hopefully you get a victory in London against a Broncos team, against a really good Broncos defense. Offense is horrible, right? And so they have some weapons on the outside. We don't know if Russell Wilson's going to play or none of those other things. But you got to find a way to get a victory. And once you get a victory, I think you'll start to see everybody settle down, calm down, and you'll kind of get in the groove.
This might be extreme with Maurice Jones-Drew here, but I'm making you James Robinson's agent right now. You got trade deadline coming up next Tuesday. You going in and saying, hey, start poking around? I might be a better fit somewhere else.
Give the Jet, get Elijah Moore coming in, get James Robinson comes. It's a perfect fantasy football trade right there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. If you're the agent, you're definitely going to talk to Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson and see what's going on, what's in the future. What future do you have for James? And if you have one, awesome. Let's start working towards it. If you don't, let's move forward so he can get some opportunities there. So if I'm the agent, I'm going to go out and do a little due diligence and figure it out. But if I'm the Jags, I'm not trading him. Why would you trade him? He's been so successful for you. And to be honest, he'll be a free agent next year anyways. I mean, maybe you may get something for him, but, are you giving up on the season? I feel like if you trade him, you're not giving yourself the best chance to win and get into a possible playoff spot, because the division's not playing that well. As we know, Matt Ryan just got benched. So you have a chance to kind of make some run here if you're able to turn some things around, and I think James should be a part of that.
I don't know what goes on in that locker room. Obviously, I'm not in there, and it's been well documented, the difference between the Peterson regime and the Urban Meyer regime. But now you're talking about 2 years in a row where you've got a James Robinson issue happening behind closed doors, and we don't really have all the information behind it. Now, I know, Brent, a lot of that last year kind of leaked out a little to the press, but we didn't get the full story except for the fact that we knew the players were kind of going up to coaches and trying to rectify the situation along with James. But is it possible there's a personnel issue here and the Jags can't necessarily handle it on the field?
It could be. I mean, it could be that they just don't like James Robinson's style. I mean, or doesn't fit what they believe to be their system. But I believe that you can't continue to get rid of talented players in Jacksonville. How many times do we have to go through this? You got rid of Jalen Ramsey. You got rid of Fowler. You got rid of this guy. You got rid of that guy. You let Calais Campbell go, who's still playing. I mean,
Fournette.
Everyone's getting like Fournette. I mean, are we going to continue to let talented players go and go ball out for other teams, and then be like, well, they weren't good here because they were a distraction or they had a horrible attitude? Like, no, he's a talented player. Talent wins in the National Football League. I've never seen a talented team not win in the National Football League. I've seen untalented teams lose in the National Football League. I've seen them lose a lot. So you got to find a way to continue to keep your talent and utilize your talent and put them in positions to be successful.